I'm going to show you 4 tie-off knots when you're stringing a tennis racket, and 2 starting knots. First knot I'm going to show you is the Wilson Pro, or what's commonly referred to as a Wilson Pro knot. The tie-off string, I like to point it towards the center of the racket. It doesn't make any difference which side of the anchor string it's on. It's just that I always try to keep it the same. I'm going to take that tie-off string and I'm going to go over the anchor string, under the anchor string, and back up through the loop. Okay? Then I'm going to take the anchor string and go back through this loop that I created one more time. To tighten this knot up, I'll pull up against the frame, I'll pull the knot down the anchor string and then rock it back up. Then I pull my knot back up against the frame and I'm done tying my string. You'll notice when I did that, I went under the anchor string just one time. Okay? So if I'm looking at this knot again, I go over, under the anchor string, and then back through this loop. Then I can cinch my knot up, but if you look at this knot, it's nothing more than an overhand knot. And then to cinch it up, I pull up, down the anchor string, rock it back up, and then cinch my knot up. Let's look at the Parnell knot. Again, I've got my tie-off string pointed towards the center of the racket. I go over the anchor string, under the anchor string, and up through the loop. Then I go over the anchor string again, under the anchor string, and up through the loop. I tighten my knot by cinching up this first loop or hitch first, and then the second hitch last. Let me show you another knot that just about every Boy Scout should know, and that's the 2/2 hitch. I've got the tie-off string now again pointed towards the center of the racket. I go over the anchor string, under the anchor string, and up through the loop. Then I can cinch up that 1/2 hitch. Then I got the tie-off string pointed towards the center of the racket. I go over the anchor string, under the anchor string, and back up through the loop. Then I can cinch this knot up. If you'll notice here, I started on the right side and I ended on the left side. Now let's look at the double 1/2 hitch. Again, my tie-off string is pointed towards the center of the racket. I go over the anchor string, under the anchor string, and up through the loop. I cinch my knot up just like I always do. Then again, my tie-off string is pointed towards the center of the racket. Now I go under the anchor string, over the anchor string, and back through the loop. Just the opposite of what I did for this 1/2 hitch. Then I can cinch this up good and tight. And if you'll notice here, I started on the right and I ended on the right. The previous knots I showed you were tie-off knots. Now I'm going to show you a starting knot. Again, I've got the string that I'm tying off pointing towards the center of my frame. I'll go over and under the anchor string 2 times. Then I'll go over the anchor string one more time, so that I'm going over that anchor string 3 times, under it twice. Then I'll come back under this string that went over the anchor string, and under that one, I'm going under 2 loops. Then I'll take these strings and pull them tight. Then I can pull my anchor string up snug, and I've got my tie-off knot. The problem with this knot is the tail points down the anchor string. I prefer to have the tail pointing more up against the frame. Okay, here's another starting knot. Again, I've got the string that I'm tying off pointing towards the center of the frame. This time I'm going to go over and under the anchor string, but I'll come up through the loop just like I've tied that 1/2 hitch so many times before. I'll do that one more time, back up through the loop. Now I take my tail and I'll go through these 2 loops. Then I can pull this string down to tighten the string up, or tighten the knot up. Then pull my string through and pull tension on it. That gives me a starting knot where the tail goes up against the frame, and it looks a lot neater. It looks like my other knots. You can use this same knot to tie off very, very thin strings if the tie-off knot that you're using is slipping through the grommet hole. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, remember now that what I did is I pointed my string towards the center of the racket that I'm tying off. I go over and under the anchor string and back up through this loop. Now, we used this same knot before for the double half hitch, the Wilson knot, the Pro knot, the Parnell knot, and we always pulled on this string to pull it up against the frame, down, and then back up. Well, I'm going to do the same thing again. This is the string that I want to pull up. So now, that starting knot went up there again 2 times. This is the string, the one in the center, that I want to pull up on, to tighten up on. Then I came through these 2 knots. Now this is the string that I want to tighten up. I pull up against the frame, pull it down the anchor string, and then back up. Then I can pull this knot, which gets a little difficult here because this string isn't quite as slippery as a tennis knot. A tennis knot would work a little better. But you sort of get the idea. And I've got a tie-off knot there that is very, very large, and if I'm using a thin gauge string in a worn out grommet, it'll keep that string from sucking into the frame. More often than not now, I'm going to use the Wilson Pro Knot when I'm tying off tennis strings. And the reason I like it is because I start with my string, again, pointed towards the center of the racket. Then I can go under that anchor string 1 time. Then I've got a little loop here that's formed, and I'm coming back through that loop to tie my knot. There is my overhand knot. Okay? If I use a Parnell knot, now, that Parnell knot I have to go over that anchor string, or excuse me, around that anchor string 2 times. And if I go around that anchor string 2 times, it causes some problems sometimes. If I had a cross string that was in here, right against there, and I'm trying to tie it off, let's say that I'm trying to tie off this knot right here. Well, I'll show you this knot when I get done. Let me show you this knot on the other side of the racket. Again, I'm coming from the, my anchor string is pointed towards the center of the racket. I go over and under this anchor string, and then I come back through this loop from the center of the racket. Then I simply tighten my knot up. I pull it up snug, down, roll it back up or rock it back up. Then I tighten my tail. Simple as that. When I tie a starting knot, again, I like to use the one that comes with the tail going up against the frame. To do that, I'll go under that anchor string 2 times, which will give me 2 loops. Here's my 2 loops now, and what I can do is I can either pull on the outside of this string or pull on from the inside. It doesn't really make any difference. And then I can pull tension against that knot right there. Okay, I'm going to pull tension on this starting knot now. And as you can see, when it tightens up, it makes for a pretty large knot. That's why I don't use this knot or a tie-off knot very often. If I've got a very thin 18 gauge string and I've got some enlarged grommets, I'll use that knot sometimes, but very, very seldom. Here's a good example of why I don't use a Parnell knot. If you look at where I have to tie this knot now, this main string, or this outside main right here, is right up against that grommet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I tie my Pro Knot, or Wilson Pro Knot. I'm starting with my anchor string going towards the center of the racket. I'll go over the anchor, excuse me, I'm starting with my tie-off string going towards the center of the racket. I'll go over the anchor string, then I'll come back up under the anchor string and through that loop. Okay? Now if I was tying a Parnell knot, what I'd have to do is I'd have to go back around that anchor string again. But since I'm not tying a Parnell knot, all I have to do is come back through this loop from the inside of the racket. Then I can tighten this up and I'm done. I think it's a lot quicker to do it this way. Okay, once I get my knot tied, I don't have very much room in there, so when I cinch this knot up, I'll probably rock it back and forth a couple of times just to make sure that I get all the slack out of that knot, and then cinch it up, and I'm done with the knots. Okay, here's my knots when I get done. These two knots right here are actually tie-off knots. And this knot right here is my starting knot. You can see that this knot right here is just a little bit larger than the other ones, but that's what you're looking for in a starting knot anyway. Another thing is this particular racket, I'm stringing it with a 15L gauge string, which is a very thick string, so these knots may look a little bit larger than normal. It's because the string's larger than normal. I thought that way it would be a little easier to see. I hope you enjoyed this video and it helps you in tying knots or choosing a knot the next time you string a tennis racket, and I hope you have a nice day.